right, welcome back. The next speaker is Rebecca Mark. Rebecca is head of developer learning at Unison Computing. She has been working closely recently with the folks at exorcism.io, which is a platform for learning and teaching programming through coding exercises and mentorship. And she's going to tell us about how Exorcism integrates with Unison and how we can all use this and other tools to foster a welcoming learning community in Unison. Take it away, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you so much, Runa. I'm so excited to be here. I consider myself a professional learner of Unison, so that's me. So we have some very simple goals today for this talk. We want to reflect on the process of learning Unison. We're going to demo a new platform, and we're going to show how you can help. And there are some very specific ways that you can help us out. So we'll get started. So the first part of this talk is reflecting about the process of learning Unison. I think we have an opportunity to assess, honestly, what are the challenges with learning our language? Because there's a value in naming what's hard. We need to know what the obstacles are to adopting the language so that we can know the investments and the interventions we need to make in the future. So what follows is going to sound like a litany of challenges, but we'll get back to them. So on the first level, we have some real skill-based challenges around learning a new language. Anytime you're doing that, you have to acquire some fundamentals. You've got syntax and language conventions, code organization conventions, build processes. You can't write multi-paxis unless you know how to define a function, right? So these are things that a lot of folks will have to learn as they're coming to the language, basic skill-based things. The second point here is that our workflow is really different from other languages. You know, it is a skill to know how to save code. That's new in this ecosystem. Editing code and resolving conflicts is different, as is library management. So on the second level, on top of that, the syntax and workflow differences are not arbitrary. They're necessitated by conceptual differences. If you're not familiar with functional programming, there's some conceptual background to cover there. Even if you are really familiar with FP, you probably haven't encountered algebraic effects that much. So that's a new concept. Conversely, if you're really used to working with type classes, you might struggle at first to define an ordering of things. So those are some conceptual challenges. And our workflow is different because our mental concept of a code base is really different. Your code is being saved and explored through an intermediary, and that's really different. And what follows from us being different as a programming language is that our ecosystem is really different. We've just seen from Simon how we're planning to move off GitHub, and that's a big change. But that's not all that's hard about learning right now. We should also acknowledge the reasons it's logistically or conceptually hard to learn. So maybe we've been trying to get information and learn via a messaging platform that is by its nature ephemeral. That's a challenge. Organizing with other people to learn things can't happen in the same way in this fully remote world. You know, we're running into a problem where there may be synchronous teaching happening somewhere, but learning by definition has to be done asynchronously right now. Maybe there are very good reasons why browsing and discovering code examples involves some friction. You know, we're in a world where files aren't the unit of meaning. It's hard to go and browse through another person's code base right now, although that is changing. And we're also a newer language. There are just less examples to draw on. And finally, maybe we're trying to learn in the context of a global pandemic where everyone is burned out and they hate staring at a screen. And at the end of the day, maybe they just want to throw their computer into the ocean. I've been there. That's a challenge to learn. And at the very top of this pyramid, there's a set of shared human challenges. Learning is an inherently vulnerable process. You may not know who to ask, where to ask, what kind of responses you can expect to get. And it's really hard to admit to a room of nerds that you don't know things. So there are a lot of ways in which our own ego kind of trips us up and gets in the way of our own learning. But this point is something that a community can really impact. Your feeling of precarity can either be reinforced by your community or it can be negated. So, I think it's a good takeaway here that programming communities which practice vulnerability, which don't practice vulnerability, run the risk of creating cultures of pedantry. And I know we've all been in those rooms. So your ability to learn is also fundamentally a function of the generosity of the community you inhabit. All of this is to say that if at any point it has felt hard to learn Unison, and if you've been frustrated, I see you, and you have real and valid reasons. And because as a former educator, I have to say, we love a pyramid. We love them. We know they're ugly. So I just want to put this diagram up here, remind you that these kind of challenges fall into buckets. We'll return to that later. So what can we do about this? We need to take a multi-pronged approach in the future. Obviously, not every intervention is going to work for every person, but we knew we needed a platform to partner with because, we're a competent team, but we were not going to design an entire learning management and content delivery system by ourselves. So we did not want to reinvent the wheel there. And for that reason, we partnered with Exorcism. And we have created a Unison specific track so that folks have an avenue for learning Unison at their own pace. And it also widens our funnel. We can get more people excited about learning Unison. So let's go ahead and take a tour. I'm going to go through a really, really quick, submission process so you can see some of the components. So we'll hop over there right now. Okay, so let's say you sign up for the Unison track. Right now, we've got a series of exercises that you can take part of. There are 25 here on this page, and they're separated loosely by difficulty. There are two ways that you can practice writing Unison code. The first is going to be via the web. And we'll enter a thing here. And there's another way, which is via the command line. The command line can be really nice because it's a little closer to our tooling. You can run the UCM. But the web, we really wanted to make sure that this offered a web component because it's a really low barrier to entry for a lot of people. You can just sit down and try Unison without having to download all of our tools. So let's take a look at the web interface. Here, I already ran this, so disregard. We've got some instructions, and I'm not going to make us live solve this, even though if this was a Coursera course, this would definitely be the point where we would pause the video and you wouldn't be able to continue unless you did this weird math riddle of the Sphinx. So I'm going to copy this. And we're going to run these tests. This test is actually running against a Dockerized instance of the UCM. And importantly, this little code that we've pasted in here has a mistake. You should always make a mistake when you're programming live. So it's going to time out here because there's an infinite loop. Yeah, cool. So you're like, oh, bummer. All right, we try and we might solve it again in a different way. That's cool. If we're really stuck, we can actually request mentorship. Maybe we need some help. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go back here. So your first task here is you can sign up for this track. We were serious about picking a really great partner in Exorcism because of their focus on community, because of the low barrier to entry, and because of the ways they are going to enable us to tackle some of the complexity around learning Unison. So That's your first to-do. Part 2 of this talk is about teaching Unison, because we have to take a pause here and pay attention to the folks who are not in the room right now. They're newcomers, people who don't know Unison yet. And everyone in this room is probably going to be bought into the project of Unison in some way. You're not here on a Friday afternoon because you're being paid. Well, I am, but you're probably not. So, the line between being a learner of Unison and a teacher of Unison is pretty slim right now. But there is going to be a future in which a lot of new people from very, very different programming backgrounds come into our community, and they might need your help. They're going to need some mentors. So this is also a call for mentors. You do not have to be an FP luminary. Mentoring can be done on a problem-by-problem basis, so you can pick the ones that you feel confident in. You get to see the student solution beforehand, and the student specifically requests feedback on some aspect of their solution. And really importantly, mentoring, the act of mentoring itself, builds community knowledge. Every time you mentor someone, you can take shared notes about what was confusing for folks. And in that way, we can build up a repository for teaching other people. So remember our ugly pyramid? This actually forms a framework of sorts for, a science for teaching programming. Mentorship does not have to be intimidating. So remember when we were talking about what's hard about learning Unison, we can use that framework. What are the skills this person needs to know to get up and running? Maybe people are struggling with functional operator precedence. Maybe they don't understand eta reduction, really basic skills. Maybe what you're noticing is that they don't understand a concept in Unison. Maybe they don't understand the concept of what a continuation is or what structural recursion is. Ask yourself, what is the context in which the student is working? Maybe they are struggling to navigate the UCM, or they're missing out on the benefits of the local UI, or they're working in a country where there's limited internet bandwidth and we need to improve our tooling. That's all context that we should be knowing as educators. And finally, what are the behaviors we want to normalize through our interactions with people? Do we want to normalize complimenting someone on some detail of their implementation, offering to add docs or helper functions, or being humble and acknowledging where we started and thanking people when they help out? Those are questions we should ask ourselves. So let's take another very brief tour and show the mentorship panel of Exorcism. And I did preload this because I didn't want to violate any privacy problems here. So this is Cody's. We made him request something. He says, I feel pretty comfortable with Unison, but I can't figure out why my solution keeps timing out. And well, we encountered sort of a similar thing. And so maybe we feel confident in mentoring Cody on this challenge. So what might we do here? We can open up this panel, and what shows up is this chat stream between you and the student and their implementation. And they ask you a question and you can respond back. And students here are pretty good about asking for specific feedback. And when they feel like they've gotten what they needed, they can close the conversation. So here we've just said, hey, Cody, I ran into this too. The optional here is in case there's a invalid input of 0, and the program will loop forever in that circumstance. So we can send that off to the student. So really lightweight. It's a really great way of doing mentorship, and Exorcism as a platform has really, really good materials on what constitutes a good mentorship interaction. So I highly recommend folks who are interested in mentorship, go and check them out. Okay, so we have more work to do, of course. So this is future work within the Exorcism track itself, and then there's also stuff kind of beyond that, but we'll focus in here. We have the option with our track to do something called the learning journey mode, which is a slightly more structured way of approaching teaching concepts. This is a mock-up, but the idea is that there's the syllabi with paths to demonstrate competency over a variety of levels of topics. So on the one hand, you might have something about string manipulation here, or if you're a more advanced person, maybe we'll have an exercise about delimited continuations for you. So this is an area of development that we can take our track. Another thing that we need is more exercises. And here you can help me out. I would love to have more exercises because I'm not saying that it's a PvP bracket amongst the functional languages, but we have 25 exercises and Haskell has over 90, and I want to come for that slot. So another thing you can help out with our track is we have the option of implementing some more advanced tooling. Right now, we are cannibalizing off of syntax highlighting from different languages. And if you're really good at regular expressions and you want to help me encode our grammar in JSON configuration, then you should talk to me. We can also write a programmatic student code analyzer, and that will help us auto-generate feedback. So please do let me know how you can, if you want to help. So I could go on about all of the ways in which we want to improve the learning experience of Unison. You know, there's more workflow videos to make, there's more labs to write, and more articles that we want to present. But in reality, to do it all, we're going to need your help. Your final to do is in some way to help others learn Unison, whether that's signing up for mentorship, asking questions to the Unison track, or just being your lovely selves. Your task is to help others learn Unison. And I think all of you have a part to play. The task of facilitating learning in a community is so much bigger than any one person. And we all have something to learn. And we all have something to offer here. So thanks in advance.